Good morning, Julia.
I do want to come back to you, actually, on the conversation we just had with Natasha Hausdorff, and I think that links in with Gary Lineker and as well as what's going on in Gaza. Yeah. But let's start with the EU summit deal, because as far as we can gather, we spoke to Theo Usherwood, our political commentator, who's out at Lancaster House today, we appear to have got done, signed as a deal, is a 12-year deal involving our fisheries. So basically, we've given away to the EU access to our fishing waters for another 12 years. They've already still had access since we Brexited. It was just going to be gradually withdrawn. Basically, as Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, has said, look, that's the end of our fishing industry to all intents and purposes. We are also going to have no checks, extra red tape on exporting food and agriculture, meat and plant goods to the EU. That's going to be better. But in return for that, we have to align with EU rules on all of those things. And if we do that, it's what's called, remember this phrase, dynamic alignment. Basically, not just the rules as they are now, but any future rule changes we have to go along with. And if there are any disputes, who gets to decide? European Court of Justice. It's almost like a foreign court is going to have the final say on what we do in our country. Not quite sure that was what we voted for in 2016. We're also going to get access to that €150 billion defence fund for rebuilding Europe's defences. So can we actually have access? Again, it's not charity. It's just that our defence contractors and manufacturers will be able to bid from that fund as opposed to being banned from doing so, because the EU are so concerned about getting the best defence items. They want to keep all the jobs in-house. There will be a youth mobility scheme, but nothing has actually been finalised on that. We don't know how many people will be allowed to come here, for how long, until what age. We also, though, are hearing that, well, very excitingly, guys, we may well be able to use e-gates at all EU countries. I say may, because currently that's not a decision of Brexit. That's up to individual EU countries already, and it will still be left to them as well. So we may still be facing those queues, which, by the way, a lot of us faced anyway. Does that sound like a good deal to you, or is this, as many have dubbed it, even in advance, just another surrender summit by, let's face it, a Remainer who became a Ramona, who spent 3 years trying to fight Brexit ever happening, only pretended to give in to it, and has always planned to take us back into the EU by the back door, because Keir Starmer, let's face it, was Ramona-in-chief for many years after Brexit. There's no reason to think he's changed his view. This is a man who went into a negotiation putting a deadline on it, deliberately put a deadline on it, this EU summit in London. Of course he had to have a deal. Last-minute giveaways, anything to get a deal across the line. And of course, extraordinarily, unlike most negotiations where you might want a similar thing at the end, say a trade deal, but mostly you're coming from your different perspectives and you might want to give away something else, because you've got different aims and objectives, different priorities. In fact, we had both sides, both the EU and Britain, having exactly the same aim, which was the surrender of British sovereignty. And that's what Keir Starmer has achieved. So well done, Ramona-in-chief. Sam Armstrong, good deal for us or not?
Well, this deal just tells you all you need to know about Keir Starmer. I mean, first things first, let's be fair to him. It's actually only the second worst deal he's negotiated since being in Downing Street. At least this time he's not paying the EU to take Dover, for example, which, you couldn't really rule out with the fellow. But look, this deal tells you what he thinks about this country. We're going to have no fish, no borders, no waters, no sovereignty. This is a man that doesn't care about preserving and protecting this country's, the very fabric, the very
really
framework.
believe in the nation state.
But it also tells you who he likes, who he supports, and who he doesn't support. Look, this deal is probably quite good for unions. The kind of companies that are going to do well out of this, defence firms, are heavily unionised, heavily structured. Some of the meat processing companies, actually the big business. Starmer's always been keen on big business. But this deal is horrendous, awful, devastating, traumatic, ending the end for our fishing industry, but also for small independent farming businesses and the like that had just got over the shock of Brexit. And there was some disruption. There were things getting organised.
There was a lot of admin, a lot of red tape, and it was costly and time-consuming.
Beginning to make the most of their new freedoms. And we were just staring down the precipice of a new, great, fantastic deal with the United States. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, unlike the EU, do the United States consumers want to buy Scottish whisky, British meats, all of the high quality, high value products that we could deliver. But instead, Starmer has attached us, welded us, wedded us to the EU, a system that is basically designed to screw over the agricultural industries of every other country. And if you think they've done a deal in order to benefit us, I've got a bridge to sell you, right? This is a deal that is horrendously, heinously, awfully bad for British farmers. And I'll tell you for why. Because they're going to have to follow all of the same rules, all of the same processes, all of the same guidance. But they've got to do it without the subsidies that EU farmers get. So we're selling products, and by the way, the French don't really want to eat British beef or British lamb or anything else. They're not interested in our high value products. What they do want to buy is just bulk agricultural products. So precisely the kind of low value agriculture that has torn the British agricultural industry really down.
Also, I don't think we sell enough horse meat for the French.
Well, quite, but of course they're the experts in relabelling it and sticking it in lasagnas and selling it back to us. But look, that is the but we jest about that, but those really high, really good agricultural standards, those are the standards we just wedded ourselves to. A food industry that was able to sell us secretly horse and pork meat mislabeled as beef for 10 years without anybody detecting it. So let's not pretend, as some of the Remainers do, that this is great.
We have higher animal welfare standards by a long way.
This deal is heinous, and it just tells us who Keir Starmer does not see as his people. If you're a pensioner, you know Keir Starmer's not with you. If you're a farmer...
Because you don't vote Labour on average.
Keir Starmer knew that you weren't... Keir Starmer wasn't with you and you knew it. And now, if you're a fisherman, you know it too. This is the most vindictive, political, small p Prime Minister we've ever had. He's got into office on the back of 33% of the public. He's prepared to do everything possible to benefit them. And who is going to get to pay for it? You, if you're listening to this, you didn't vote for him. You go to work, you do the right thing, you're trying hard, you're trying to get on. This Prime Minister is out to get you.
But e-gates, passport e-gates, Sam, that's what they'll tell us. Apparently we're going to be allowed to use the e-gates. We've already been allowed to use the e-gates, and it's up to individual countries. Why Portugal lets us. Some airports you can go through, some airports you can't. And it's mostly down to just bad-mannered customs officers who'll sit there doing sod all because there's only 3 people arriving on a plane from France, and then watching us all sit there with only 1 bloke doing the stamping. It's entirely up to individual countries and individual airports whether we use the e-gates.
And you know what, Julia? Look, I volunteer. I'm prepared to queue for 20 minutes to get into Italy in order to save the British fishing industry from being made
genuinely,
extinct.
I stand there with my passport and I'm just like, they go, British passport, yes, and proud, I say. My husband just sort of puts his head in his hands as usual. No, but if that's the deal, that's entirely... If they, as we were saying earlier, if they want to make it harder for us to come to the country, and as I've always said, support the countries that make it easy and are welcoming to us. If a lot of people in Spain are saying they don't want you to travel there, don't travel there. We are pretty much their entire tourist industry, which is a huge part of their economy. Fine, if you don't want... Go to Portugal, go to Greece, go to countries where you are welcome. That's what I think. But there we are. Look, there's so much more I want to talk about this. I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Is this a surrender summit? It certainly looks like it so far. We get everything what we understand so far, what has been leaked from the room. God knows how much is going to be in the small print. Good Lord. The thing is, they won't... You can't remember, not only will the politicians, and I mean, Ollie Robbins is the guy who's negotiating. This is the guy who was part of Theresa May's surrender back in the late teens. These people are full-on Remoaners. They're not just Remainers, full-on Remoaners. They genuinely think that the god-awful, bigoted, ignorant British public, we all got it wrong, and they're gonna just make it better for us because obviously we need to be in the EU. Remember the lovely civilised EU, not like us. And they're going to just take us in by hook or by crook, no matter what. Everyone involved in this, the civil servants, the negotiators, the politicians, and on the other side, all fully signed up to this whole cross-border EU great. Let the technocrats run everything. Don't let the people have their say. They genuinely think they know better than us, and that's the issue. They won't see this as a surrender. They really won't. And neither, by the way, will most of the media reporting it, because they are all fully signed up to this as well. Still remember, very, very, very well-known leading figure, is a senior political editor, a major broadcaster, saying to me back before Brexit, privately, do you support Brexit? but I thought you were clever. I thought you were one of us. He actually said that to me. I'm going to say it wasn't the BBC. I'm just telling you it wasn't the BBC. But yeah, love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. That's what they think of us Brexiteers. By the way, 52% of the voting public. Let's talk just very briefly about Joe Biden. Announcement that the former US president has prostate cancer. Very sad. Wouldn't wish that on anybody. It does sound like it's an aggressive form of prostate cancer, but we understand it was found during a routine physical examination of the former president, but that they do believe that it is a form that can be effectively managed and treated. Now, we know that prostate cancer is incredibly common in older men, particularly a man who's 82 years old. And obviously we hope for the best and we wish him a full recovery. But also most men who have prostate cancer of any age die with it, not of it, thankfully. It's incredibly common. My concern over this, and again, we were talking about this earlier, Sam, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's not where I roll. But the fact that we know for a fact that we were lied to for a number of years, not just months, years, about Joe Biden's health when it came to his dementia. It was clear for everyone to see. It was only when it became too obvious to hide during that first leadership debate against Donald Trump. Even Donald Trump, I think, was like, what the hell is going on? That he had to be ousted and forced. And he was dragged kicking and screaming from the standing on the Democrat ticket. They didn't want to get rid of him because they knew their second option was going to have to be Kamala Harris, and they all knew how useless she was. They pretended for a bit, but once the public got sight of her, they realised how awful she was. There was a reason why Donald Trump won. There's a reason why, if I were an American, I would have voted for Donald Trump over her for many different reasons. And the reality is they lied for years about that. The White House media, the White House staff, the whole Democrat system, all the echelons in the party, the Washington media lied to us about it. I don't believe for a moment that this prostate cancer has suddenly been found. However, the timing is very interesting. There's a new book by Jake Tapper, a senior journalist in America, all about basically the cover-up of the former president's health over the years, all looking very embarrassing for the president. And now suddenly we found out he's got prostate cancer, so now everyone has to be nice. I want him to survive. I wish you the very best. But at the end of the day, I think Joe Biden's lied to us. I think Jill Biden's lied to us. The White House press secretary lied to us. The Washington press corps lied to us for years. So now I'm sorry, I don't believe a word you say.
Yeah, and the worst of those is, of course, the media.
Yep.
Who are under a moral and ethical obligation as journalists to tell us the truth, to never get into bed with administrations left or right, good or bad, to always be fiercely independent. They lost sense of who they were to Trump derangement syndrome. It happened time and time again. We all knew what was going on, and it's incredibly corrosive because it used to be the case that those kind of basic biographical details about the president, you could trust what was being said.
They'd have the annual medical is really. That said, Donald Trump's annual medical is laughable, saying like what his weight is and things. But he clearly doesn't have dementia. But
it's the Democrats that lecture us all the time, people on the right, about how corrosive Donald Trump is to standards.
And he
in public
does lie
life.
20 times before breakfast.
And I'm sure that is true. But they are jointly and equally responsible for the denigration and deterioration of public standards that we have come to expect. And I'm sorry, I don't want to hear it from them anymore. I wish Joe Biden all the best, but any journalist that played any role in covering up the obvious, blatantly obvious, could see it with our own eyes, health conditions that man had, is not fit to be a journalist, is not fit to report on the news.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. I think that's absolutely shocking behaviour. And again, my thing is, like, even with the politicians who I agree with politically on a specific policy, or I'm actually good friends with, I will still take on in this studio. There are no friends when you're having an interview, as far as I'm concerned. It's my job to hold people to account. Interesting, by the way, lovely Labour backbench MP Mike Tapp, who was tweeting that he won't come on Mike's show or my show because we're entertainment presenters and not journalists. I think the problem is that the last two times he's been on, he's had his backside handed to him and just been laughed out of court by everybody in the on social media because of his failure to answer sensible questions and absolute just talking utter nonsense. So sorry, Mike, that you're not up to it. But, I'm sorry I interrupted you when I was interviewing you, but you did keep saying things that weren't true. That was kind of the problem. But you're welcome on Anytime, mate. Always, all comers welcome here. Let me just read you some breaking news about a man called Abu Wadi. Do you remember him? He was in the news a few months back, and he's a Palestinian man. He's also known as Mossab Abdul Karim al-Gassas. He's believed to have arrived on a small boat. He was brought ashore in Kent back in March this year. But extraordinary, it was revealed by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism that this is a man who posted numerous videos online praying for all Jews to be killed, posted a picture of himself holding an assault rifle. Apparently he'd been brought in, brought here to the shores, been arrived by a small boat, brought ashore, processed, set free, carry on as you were. This was on a Thursday. It wasn't until the Sunday he was actually arrested. He has been charged. He was charged with making anti-Semitic posts. He's now pleaded guilty this morning at Canterbury Crown Court to arriving in the UK in March without valid entry clearance, so illegal entry in the country. But again, abject failure of us to have any proper controls. And we've seen, haven't we, that Iranian terror crime arrests that have been made, that the men who've been arrested and charged with crimes have been living in asylum hotels, having arrived here, we understand, illegally, or certainly claimed to have been needing asylum in this country. And yet, again and again and again, it's just like there are people who are free and roaming our streets. And again, I do not know whether these people are guilty or innocent. People have a right to a fair trial. I'm not not making a judgment on that. But we simply don't know who these people are.
This is an invasion. In fact, it is the biggest invasion of men crossing the English Channel in small boats that all hate us, want to take over this country, want to replace our government with a different system of ideology since 1066. Yeah. You literally have to go back that far to face a situation of this scale. Time and time again, fighting-age men coming into the UK with proven, demonstrable, historic records of hating this country and everything
Open
we stand
social
for.
media posts.
And are we just to assume that somehow, mysteriously, magically, by virtue of being put up in the Premier Inn in Slough for 6 months, that they're going to come out loving us, loving our values, ready to fit in, ready to leave all of their values and barbarism behind? And in many cases, they are barbaric values. I'm afraid that,
certainly compared to where we are now.
I'm afraid if you believe some of the things we have seen asylum seekers in this country coming in with views about women, that you're barbaric. I believe if you come over here thinking that all Jews need to be put to death, that is barbarism. Yep. We have seen it time and time and time again. I don't want to see it anymore. Keir Starmer, you promised to smash the gangs. Mike Tapp promised to smash the gangs. That's how he got elected in Dover. It's time for you to make good on the promises you made. And Mike, by the way, looking at what happened with your local council elections, I think Reform are coming to cash in on that.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck with that. Yeah. Can I just quickly, before we go to break, I wanted to ask you what conversation we had with Natasha Hausdorff a little bit earlier, lawyers for Israel, talking about, we've got this Israeli offensive in Gaza, and they're basically seeking to sort of the Israeli troops are pretty much withdrawn. Now they're going back in again. They are going to be allowing more food supplies back in. I think that's a concern for any right-thinking person. Although, again, there's no other war we're expected to supply the enemy. Because these civilians aren't the enemy. No, but they're being used by the enemy as a weapon, effectively. Do you think that was the right thing for Israel to do? Because it's interesting that Hamas, we understand, at the weekend sort of came back to say, in return for a ceasefire, we'll release more hostages. Everyone says you only get hostage releases when there's a ceasefire. No, you only get a ceasefire and then hostage releases when there is war. Because at the end of the day, that's the only language Hamas understands.
Firstly, I actually think there's far fewer hostages in Gaza than they're made out to be. But by the displays we've seen with hostages being released, I think the level of complicity in what Gaza is doing. Just remember, Hamas aren't necessarily unpopular in Gaza. Okay,
you're saying far fewer. You think more live hostages, or
sorry, I'm saying there's far fewer civilians.
Oh, civilians.
Civilians. Sorry. I think there's too many in Gaza. I'm more than happy with the current regime. I think institutional anti-Semitism has been.
They've been living under that propaganda for decades.
For a very long time. fine. But no other country on earth has been expected to prosecute a war in the same way that Israel has. No. And Israel has, in my opinion, demonstrated remarkable, historic, unprecedented levels of control, restraint in dealing with this. And time again, how is that restraint repaid? With more terrorism.
Yeah, and again, all of the criticism, we've had BBC Verify, criticising this attack on hospital grounds, where clearly, we know that Mohammed Sawar later took over from Yahya Sinwar as his brother, as leader of Hamas. He was killed, we understand, in tunnels around there. Oh, but absolutely, Hamas aren't putting tunnels and command and control centres under hospitals. Just finally also on Israeli entry to Eurovision. I thought it was very telling. I mean, protests. A young British bloke from Youth Demand, you know exactly what he looks like. You know what I mean? You can picture him right now. Basically being arrested and wrong with another Palestinian flag. He wanted to throw blood over the Israeli entry as Yuval Raphael. She is a young woman who turned to singing after she survived the Nova massacre. It's her first music festival she'd ever gone to. She and 50 other people hid out, trying to carry away from the gunmen from Hamas. They just shot in, threw grenades and shot in. And she basically, advice of her father, and we've got it all on video, he said, just hide, play dead. Everyone just play dead. And she survived, under people's dead and dying bodies. She was able to survive. And some little squirt from Youth Demand wanted to throw blood over her to make a protest about Gaza. These people aren't real.
Well, but do you know what the good thing is, Julia? That these people, the likes of Gary Lineker, elites, minor people, whoever they are, they don't speak for us, because Israel won the popular vote. The people of Europe stood by Israel. They're going to continue to stand by Israel. These people can attempt to misrepresent the reality of where people are, what people think, but the reality is good, right-thinking people are standing by Israel to this day.